Good afternoon, Nashville History Club members and guests. As I said, my name is Jay Brothers, and I was honored when Gene asked me to introduce this week's speaker, my neighbor Ed Rohde. It has been a pleasure having Ed and his family as neighbors for many years. Ed came to Nashville and had worked with the old Nashville banner, for those of y'all who remember that. Over the years, we've heard some good stories from that time period. He then went into commercial photography with clients, and then ended up doing pictures and portraits of people and persons in the music industry. His easy personality and his knack for getting the picture led to developing many relationships, which we'll see in a moment. Last year, he finally published his book, Songwriter, Musician Behind the Curtain, and it ended up being ranked as one of the best music books by Rolling Stone last year, which was an incredible accomplishment. We got ours last year and easily took care of a lot of family gifts at Christmas. And so it was an easy call. And so after we do this, he can, if you or friends are interested, that you can find out how to also get access to these. But otherwise, please welcome friend, neighbor, and amazing documentarian Ed Rohde.
Thank you, Jay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ed Rohde, and I am a neighbor of Jay. How long have we been neighbors? 25? Yeah, been a while. We used to have different colored, I used to have different colored hair when I first moved down there. But it is a great joy to be here today. I'll tell you a little bit about my book I published last year. I guess I started in photography when I was in high school. I'll give you a quick little quick tutorial. I guess what happened to me, I was very involved with athletics when I was in grade school, and when I got to high school, I thought for sure I would make it into the varsity basketball team. That'd be my future. Playing for the NBA, playing for the colleges. That was my future. I could see this. And my junior year of high school, let me flip here. This is the beginning of me. Yes, I think I was 3 or 4, and that was a Monkey's guitar, believe it or not, my parents gave me. I wish I had that today. It'd be worth a pretty penny. But as you can tell, I took basketball really seriously, and that's a much younger me, 1992, believe it or not. I was walking to the gym, tryout day, and all the kids were dressed, and we were walking down the hallway, and the coach was standing by the doorway, and as I was going to the entrance of the gym, the coach stopped me in front of everybody, turned me around, put me against the wall. And I said, my gosh, what's going on, coach? And he says, son, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm trying out for the varsity basketball team. And he goes, no, you're not. Go find something else to do. I'm not going to waste your time. You're not going to make it. And that was a change of life for me, because all the way up to that point, I for sure was going to be a professional player in my mind. And so the basketball season started, and I started going to the games, and I realized that I had no friends left. Everybody was on the basketball team. And I sat up in the top of the gymnasium all by myself. And I was so lonely and so in such despair, I couldn't figure out what the heck to do with my life. And then I saw one of my few friends in high school sitting underneath the basket with a camera around his neck, and he was shooting pictures for the yearbook. And I said, wait a minute, if you can do that, he's sitting right next to the cheerleaders, closer to the bench, he's got the best view of the game, and he gets to go to all the sporting events. Why can't I do that? And I picked up the camera, my dad's camera, the next day, and I started shooting photos. Luckily enough for me, I picked up the camera kind of in a fast way, but I was lucky at the time. I was living here in Grand Rapids, Michigan at that time, and the Grand Rapids Press had one of the best photojournalism departments in the Midwest. It was amazing. They had a program that it was called a mentor program. I can't remember the exact name of it, but they would take high school students in, and they would let you come down to the newspaper and then follow around a journalist, a graphic designer, a photojournalist. And I was lucky enough to be accepted in that program. And so every day after school at 3 o'clock, I would jump in my car and I'd run down to the newspaper, and then I'd jump in another car with a photojournalist. and we go all over Grand Rapids, and we cover sports, news, fires, fashions, everything under the sun. And in about 2 years when I graduated, I was working almost full-time for the Grand Rapids Press because of that mentorship. And so that's what really got me going. It was that small amount of just care that a couple photojournalists took for me. They took me under their wing, and they said, jump in the car, sit right there, watch what I do. And I learned so fast that way, 2 years. And then I got to college. And yeah, I have a business degree, but that was just BS. I was there just to be the photo editor for the newspaper. It's like, if I have to take business courses, fine. To stay in the college so I can be the photo editor, I'll do that. Fine. And so I spent 4 years getting a business degree. There I am in high school right there. Yeah, that's a manual focus, Nikon F3, Tri-X film, 1600 push twice. I can give you all kinds of boring details. In the middle of a rainstorm shooting a football game. And man, I had dark hair, didn't I? And this is me arriving in Nashville in 1990 with my father. And I had my whole life packed in that car. But to get back to that story, 4 years in college, working for the newspaper, got a business degree, and then spent a year out in the real world, and then realized that wasn't quite enough, and I got my master's from Ohio University in photo communications, and that sort of put me out where I needed to be in the world with all this experience and education. And my first staff photographer job was the Nashville Banner. And I threw my whole life in that little tiny Saab and drove down here July 2nd, 1990. And as I crested the hill over Trinity Lane, the city kind of appeared. And it was like a movie, you know? It was like, 7 o'clock at night, and the sun was setting and the light was coming across, and I was like, wow, this is pretty darn cool. Pretty cinematic, you know? Little did I know what was ahead of me. This is the city, sort of what I came into. Obviously a pretty small city. It doesn't look that way now. This is circa probably 1999. When was, you know what, I should know this, Jay, when was the Bell South Tower built? 97, maybe? You know what, I should know. Yeah, late 90s. This is right after that building was built. I went down and did a portrait of Nashville. I mean, to me, my father was a guitar teacher. I grew up with music. My mother played piano and sang. They had every Chet album in the world. You know, my dad taught fingerstyle. And so every Chet album ever made was in our collection. My mother loved the Beatles. I mean, I grew up with music, and every point in my life I can direct a song, you know what I mean, as a memory. If I hear that song today, it takes me back to that time. And to me, this is sort of my beginning in Nashville in the early 90s. It was still kind of a quiet, small town. And it kind of wrapped around the Ryman, and one night, it was a rainy night, I got up on top of a building and just kind of shot this portrait of the Ryman. It's quite different today, as we all know. And in those days, too, you could get around pretty easily, and let me see come on, Internet, be nice to me. You can get around those days and actually see a lot of music pretty easily. You know, parking was easy. This is the old Station Inn. And I ended up, Jay, give you a little bit of my history. I ended up at the Nashville Banner as a staff photographer. And one of the first people I met in this town was Chet Atkins. You know, let me ask, you guys know who Chet Atkins is, right? Yeah. I mean, obviously, Mr. Guitar, right? And so my father, of course, I grew up with every album he had. And there I am, I think it was my second assignment for the Banner, shaking hands of Chet at a #1 party. And I was like, you just don't know, how many, albums like he said, son, don't worry about it. I put a few records out. And I said, yes, you have. And then I kept seeing Chet over the next 6 months at #1 parties at events because the newspaper would send me to photograph it. So Chet, being the guy he was like, well, son, come up to my office. I'd love to chat with you. You know, you seem like a nice young man. I was like, I'm faking him out there. And, and just kind of hang out with me. So Chet, every time I saw him, would say, come up to my office. And so I started visiting Chet in his office, and I'd be up there a couple times a month. And over time, maybe another 6 or 8 months, I've been up there 10 or 15 times. And he'd take me up to the 3rd floor. It was just on Music Row on 16th Avenue, and he had a house, 3 floors. And on the top of this house, he had a practice room. And in his practice room were 2 guitars. His Orange Gibson, which is now in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and a 1946 Martin you can see in the background there. And just picture, I made this little montage here, kind of represent my afternoons with Chet. I would sit across from him as he would pick up his guitar. He always had a guitar with him. And no matter what we were talking about, he started plucking a tune. And every time he plucked a tune, I would listen because I would know that tune. And he would play that tune perfectly. No matter how complicated, he'd be sitting there talking to me, playing this tune up and down the neck, and I'd be like going, what do I pay attention to, Chet? The man talking to me, or his hands up and down that neck? It was ridiculous. And so maybe almost a year into our relationship, I asked him, have you ever been photographed up here at a practice office? And he goes, well, no, son, I haven't. And guess what? That day I brought my camera in and made that photo. And to the left of Chet is a big picture window, a big piece of glass that overlooked Music Row. And he used to open that drape and sit there and play that guitar, and that sun would pour in. And I just happened to bring my Hasselblad 6x6 and set that up, and I just had my normal conversation with him. And while he was playing, I snapped a few photos. Now, back in those days, that's only 12 exposures, and it was manual focus. Tough time. But in that time, I managed to get something I like, and this, I guess, is the start of my project, because that same day I said, Chet, I need to do a documentary project. I need to have something. And he goes, son, I got you covered. You need to go hang out with the songwriter musicians in Nashville. They are the backbone of this community. And I said, oh my God, that's wonderful. Are there songwriters in Nashville? Because I was kind of new. And he kind of chuckled and said, yes, there are. And guess what? I'm going to make a few phone calls. And by God, he did. And by a couple months later, I was hanging with Willie Nelson and Hank Cochran, and the list is long, and it was amazing. And so Chet sort of pushed me off, and he says, swim to the other side of the lake, son, you're going to be just fine. And that's how the music project started in 1990. And the project was very simple. I would meet a songwriter or musician. I would maybe do a quick little interview, talk to them about their job, how they do it. And then I would say, let's do a photo, and it has to be in their favorite place, or something inspirational, maybe where they write songs, or maybe where they record, or something like that. And then recommend somebody else for the project. So this was, all project was recommended by people who were in the project, you know, and that was the cool part about it. It wasn't me just picking. It was Chet saying, you need to talk to Willie, and then Willie saying, Hank Cochran, and then Hank Cochran saying, you need to talk to Willie Nelson. And that's kind of how this thing happened over 30 plus years. And so let's move on to this one right here. This is the Nashville I ran into in 1990, where you could walk down and maybe get mugged. It's a little worse now, but maybe, well, not muggy wise, but the smell probably. But this is what I ran into. I mean, literally puts Tootsies right there. Two guys, one guy smoking a cigarette, one guy playing out in front of it. This might have been like late 90, early 91, you know, where this picture was taken. And this was the pace of Nashville at that point. I kind of love this because this is, you can see how grimy and dirty it was back in those days. Broadway was nothing to shout about in the early 90s. This is before they had the big restoration project. Oh gosh, okay. So this is Vince Gill. Now I have to back up here. I'm sorry. So this is Chet. You see that guitar in the back of Chet's office? That's a 1946 Martin, right? So years later, I was on the golf course and I met Vince, and of course I've been shooting Vince for years. And I said, Vince, guess what? This book is almost in production. You're, you know, excited to show you. And, you know, I remember the picture of Chet, you know, I showed you years ago. Let me show you that picture. And I was showing Vince's picture. And I said, I know where the Gibson is. The Gibson's in the Country Music Hall of Fame. I don't know where that Martin went. Do you happen to know where that 1946 Martin went? And, you know, because, you know, that's the kind of thing Vince does. And he knows a lot. And he says, wink, wink, I know where that Martin went. And I said, please tell me the story. And he told me the story about after Chet passed, his wife, Leona, said, come on down, have a cup of coffee with me. And then Vince went over to the house, had a cup of coffee, and then she said, wait a minute, I want to show you something. They walked down the steps. She unlocked this door with all these locks. It was sort of a basement, and that door opened, and Vince said it was like this golden light came shining out, and it was just a room full of guitars. And she said, go walk around and play something, see what you like. And Vince spent so much time down there, he doesn't remember how much it was. He picked up a bunch of guitars, including that one in his hands right there. That was the 1946 Martin. He played it, he said, man, this is an amazing guitar, and put it down. He's a Martin expert. And then went up, finished the coffee, left, thanked her. 2 weeks later, forgot about it. 2 weeks later, knocked on Vince's door. She had sent him the 1946 Martin. And that became part of the collection. Of course, when Vince told me the story on the golf course, I said, well, guess what, Vince? We're reshooting your portrait. I'll be over. And this, of course, is his living room, folks. So, you know, it's a guitar shop, recording studio, historical. He should have a historical marker in front of it, probably, right? And of course, you know, I had to put him and that guitar together with all that history. And of course, Vince talks glowingly about Chet too, and how much Chet helped Vince. I mean, one of the obviously best guitar players in the world, helping the best guitar player in the world. You know, it was so much fun to stick. This is Bill Mead. Yep. So you know, Vince is, after you spend 36 years in this town, you know, you end up shooting a bunch of these guys many times. So it was really difficult putting this project together because you have to figure out what decade do I want to represent here, you know, because I have Vince from 1990, different guy back then, you know. I think this one really told a better story. So that had to go in the book. There we go right there. So one of the first calls that Chet made was to Hank Cochran. And you guys know Hank Cochran? Oh my gosh, an incredible songwriter, legendary guy. And then, of course, spent some time with Hank. And then Hank said, well, Ed, you need to see Willie. You need to meet Willie right away. And I said, well, Hank, he lives in a bus. It's 1992. You know, cell phones weren't exactly a thing back then. I don't know how you're going to get it. No, I know how to get a hold of Willie. Trust me. I said, okay, I'll leave it up to you, Hank. We'll talk next week. Next week shows up. Hank says, okay, Willie said come meet him at the bus. He's going to be here this week doing a TV show. I said, okay, Hank, whatever, okay. It's on Music Row too, so it's easy to get to. So next week, I think it was that Friday night, I wandered down to where Hank Cochran tells me to go, and there's Willie's bus. And I tell security, you know, is that Willie Nelson's bus? Said, yeah, it sure is, man. You know, he just finished the show, don't bother him. They said, no, he's suspecting me. Walk up to the bus, knock on the bus, and the door opens, and this 6-foot guy kind of falls out of the bus, and he looks at me. He's got a leather jacket on. I think he's going to beat the tar out of me right there. And it's like, listen, no, Willie's suspecting me. My name's Ed Rody. I'm a photographer. And he gave me the evil eye and says, well, you wait a minute. The door closes again. He's bigger than the door. And a couple of minutes pass, and I'm thinking, I could run. I can get out of here right now. Nobody will know who I am, you know. Maybe I should get out of here quickly. You know, I was scared to death. Door opens again, and I go, oh, God, it's too late. Okay, I'll take the beating if I'm going to get it. And out steps Willie. And he smiles, walks over to me, and shakes my hand. He says, any friend of Hank Cochran is a friend of mine. And pulls me in the bus. And then there's a party going on in the bus. Shocker. You guys might not know that about Willie, but I'll tell you now, there was a party back there, and he pushed the party to the back end of the bus, and then we sat on the front on this nice little couch, and he shooed everybody away. He called for Trigger. Who's Trigger?
Guitar.
Right. He called for Trigger. Trigger magically appeared, and we sat there for about a half an hour, and he just sat there and played songs for me. Now, during this performance, I was thinking to myself, my God, here I am with Willie on the front of his bus alone. This guy's been photographed 100 million times, right, Jay? 100 million times. How am I going to pull this off? And I said, wait a minute. What would Willie be interested in? And I laid him out the question. I said, Willie, what song are you working on? Boom. Split second. He looked down at his guitar pick in his hands. Snap. One frame. That's all I got. One frame. And to me, that introspection, that little moment, tells me more about that man than the other 150 million pictures of him. It's just so much of his personality in that photo. And he smiled at me, and he played another 20 minutes, and he played me new songs, he played me old songs, and afterwards gave me a hug, and then invited me back to the party.
Is that a pipe in the sand?
It's a guitar pick. Yeah, and so wonderfully, a couple hours later, I stumbled out of the bus and went and fell asleep in my car. After I woke up, I really didn't know what I had. I had film at that point, so it took a while for me to develop the film and look at it, but this is one of my treasured photos of all time, obviously. It's just, to me, he's such an icon and a songwriter, and so much outlaw movement. Everything Willie has touched in his life has been fascinating, and including all his music, so this is one of my favorites. And that's, of course, is Trigger. I had a chance to spend a little time with Trigger at a recording studio, and of course I had to make Trigger's official portrait, you know. So this guy changed my life. This is Neil Diamond. And so fast forward a few years, I had gotten married. This is 1995. And I've been working at the newspaper 40 hours a week, doing everything in the world. And then I also been on Music Row 40 hours a week after hours. So I was doing 80-hour weeks. And my lovely wife at the time, who had married me in 94, said, "Hey, am I ever going to see you?" And it was probably a true statement at that point. It was like, yeah, maybe I should make a decision here. And at that same time, one of my good friend, my great producers, Don Cook, called me one day and says, "Come on down to the studio. I need you to meet somebody I'm recording." And I was like, "Who?" Don, of course, recorded the Mavericks, recorded the Brooks and Dunn, wrote all those great 90s songs with Ronnie and Kicks. And so generally Don didn't buy too much. So I knew whatever Don invited me to was going to be fascinating and amazing. And I walk into the studio and I hear this voice coming from the speakers. I said, "God, that really sounds like Neil Diamond. That's really strange." And I walk into the master control room and there comes Neil Diamond. And he waves me out to the studio. I go out and I shake his hand and he says, "I hear you're working on a songwriter project." I guess it leaked a little bit. And he said, "How about we want you to portrait right now?" And I could not get my camera fast enough. I could not get my light fast enough. That is the drum set behind him in the studio. And at that point, his cigar had gone out. Famously, he grabbed another cigar, lit it, and while he was lighting it, I had my camera set up luckily, and as that flame went up, snap. He smiled at me and blew the smoke at me, and to me, this was so quintessential Neil Diamond. First class, amazing fellow. I spent a year with him. At that point, I was able to tell the Nashville banner, "Thank you very much. I think I'm going to go out on my own." And Neil made it possible because I think I made my banner salary in about a month with him. So it was a great transition out of photojournalism. I'm still a photojournalist, of course, but into commercial photography. And so I jumped at that point and decided to just go full time and become a commercial photographer. And I really give Neil all the credit in the world because working for him for over a year, I did a lot of things with him on that. He made an album in Nashville, Tennessee Moon, and I spent a lot of time with him. And it was amazing seeing such an amazing icon do his job. And also he introduced me to Cuban cigars. It is a Cuban cigar, by the way. He was so generous. There'd be a box every day. A FedEx would show up every Monday. A FedEx box would show up at the recording studio, and he would open it up, and in that box would be Cuban cigars. You would think most people like get away from my cigars, but he would say, "Wait a minute, hey, have you tried a Cuban cigar?" And he would just hand them out. And of course, at that point, to me, Cuban cigars was like, "What is a Cuban cigar?" It was, educational, and but what a sweetheart of a guy. I'm kind of moving fast here, guys. I know we have much time. So I'll tell you my Dolly story. I've been lucky to photograph Dolly again for 3 decades, and she is such a pro. Everything you hear about Dolly is true. What can I say? I can't add anything to it. I mean, she's an amazing woman. I mean, there's nobody like her in the world. Songwriter, actor, icon. I don't know. And they're like, she holds like 20 different hats and wears them beautifully. This picture I shot in the early 2000s. And we were doing a television show somewhere out near where Opryland is, and we were on a TV set, and they were on a commercial break between the interview, and I was kneeling low behind the cameras, and there was a video monitor down to my left. I was right under her, and this video monitor, they were queuing up footage, and up came 1967 Dolly and Porter Wagner on the Porter Wagner show, and black and white footage started running. And she was concentrating on the interview happening, and then it paused, and then she looked down and caught that video. And for about 3 seconds, she did that. She went back in time. And I happened to notice it because the monitor was pretty much right next to me. And I managed to get 2 frames off. That's it. This is the second frame. But to me, I kind of disregarded it until maybe a month later. And so I started editing my footage and realized, wow. That's a beautiful moment, you know. That's really Dolly there. That's not Dolly out, on the stage. That's Dolly personally, looking back. Because without Porter, we wouldn't have Dolly probably, you know. Porter brought her on the show and helped make her famous, you know. So there's such an emotional connection there, and I just one of my favorite portraits too. If you guys have any questions, yell them out, and I can try to answer for you. Since we talked about Dolly, here's another young woman, Miss Taylor. I happened to meet her when she was 15, when she was kind of making a name for herself in this town, and I was very fortunate to spend some time with her and make many photographs. And she reminded me a lot of Dolly. She was so mature. I mean, at 16, I'm talking, having conversations with her, and I feel like I'm talking to a 32-year-old. And so confident in her abilities that were just developing there. She'd be talking about songs that she'd be writing, and how confident these songs would hit, and they did. And every time I had a chance to be around her, always amazed at how she could pull it off. Always amazed on her songwriting skill. Always amazed at how poised and mature she was. I just feel privileged to spend some time with her. Here, I think she had just written her first #1 song, and I caught her, and we thought it was a good time to do a quick portrait, and the light was gorgeous, and she looked over her shoulder and gave me a wink, and so another treasured moment there with her. But yeah, an amazing artist, Taylor. Oh gosh, okay, can you guys, this might take a second to look at, as I'm skipping through, as we're walking through time here. Let's jump maybe 10 or 15 years. Keith Urban hit town. And I was lucky to meet Keith through Garth Brooks brought Keith in, did a lot of things with Keith early on, and I photographed Garth a bunch. And so I met Keith very early on. And this, I think probably 2012 or 13, in that era, he had just written a new album and decided to hit the Nashville bars. And back in 2012, Nashville wasn't the Nashville today. You could actually get around and hit a few bars or play a few songs. So the rumor went that Keith might show up at Tootsie's, and I was like, you know what? I know a bartender or two down there. I'm going to go down there and see if he shows up. I got down there early, and as you can tell, it was shoulder to shoulder. I couldn't even squeeze in the door. It was so hard. I had to push myself through the door. You can see the door down there in the lower right. Truly, it was that crowded that night. And I was walking along the wall, and there used to be a table over there by the window. And it was the only table there. And in that table sat two people. One was to me, it looked like an old woman in dark hair over their face. Looked like, almost homeless. And I couldn't figure out, what was she doing there? Why is she there in this sea of young people and music? But, dark hair over the face, head down, blue shirt. And I was like, wow, this is strange. And kind of forgot about it and walked past there, walked all the way down to the back of the bar, said hello to my little bartender friend, and then realized that there was no way I could get a picture of the stage if Keith does show up. And then soon after Keith showed up, he came in, the seat parted, Keith jumped up on stage, and he started playing. Well, luckily the bartender says, hey bud, would you like to stand on the bar? And I said, now the Tootsie's bar is like this high, right? It's a pretty high bar. And he says, dude, I would love to. You're going to have to throw me up there because I can't, there's no way to climb up there. He says, I got you. He literally picked me up and threw me up on the bar. And at that moment, I stood up, and there I was like this, looking down in Tootsie's at this sea of people, and Keith on stage playing. And then he played a song, and the place went nuts. And then he started playing an Aerosmith song. And I was like, my God, why is he playing an Aerosmith song? This is strange. And then, again, the seas parted twice. And to the right at that small table, this homeless bag lady, I thought, stood up. And it was not a homeless bag lady, it was Steven Tyler. And I said, oops. And the seas parted, and I said, how does he do that? And he walked straight up to the stage, and this is the moment they met on stage. And I stood on that bar for 30 minutes, and I had the best view you would ever believe of this sweet little concert that went on at Tootsie's. Little did I know that there's a security camera back there behind the bar at that moment. And I didn't know this at the time, but maybe 3 or 4 years later, a friend came up and says, yeah, I saw you do the Tootsie's. I said, I haven't been at Tootsie's in a while. What do you mean? He says, no. Apparently, they put the security footage online about Keith showing up and playing. I said, great. How do you see me in this sea? Oh, it was behind you. I saw your rear end the whole concert. I said, that's my best side. There you go. Perfect. So one of my favorite photos, obviously. There's so much history in that place at that moment. There's Hank Sr. on top of Keith. Look at that. And just the moment those two met on stage, you can see how happy they were. And they jammed together for a while. I see a question. What's that?
Who's the other guy on stage?
Oh, that's Keith's bass player. Yeah, yeah, Mr. Flowers, and he's an incredible songwriter too. So he was. There's also a drummer back there hidden, but that's a great question. I have not been asked that a lot. Anybody know Billy Joe Shaver? Texas troubadour, lived a life. I mean, there's got to be movies coming out in his life. You know, shot a guy, knifed a guy. How many fights did Billy Joe get into? Mike, he was probably the world's. He's the best prize fighter in Nashville. This guy got in so much trouble when he was drinking and drugging. He'd walk in the bar and he'd come out like a tornado. Doesn't matter. You know, that was Billy Joe's reputation. And I was introduced to him by another great guy, Gary Nicholson, and Gary had played with Billy Joe in Texas, and I told Billy Joe what I was doing, and this was I think we were at a nightclub, and Billy Joe stared me in the face, and I knew his reputation, and he was a big man. He leaned down, he says, "I'm going to take you to where I was going to jump off a cliff." And I said, "Oh, okay, Billy Joe, sure, whatever you want. What do you want to do it?" 2 days, come to my apartment in Bellevue, pick me up. I said, "You want me to pick you?" "Yes, pick me up." Gave me the address, and he stomped out the back door, and I said, "Is he messing with me?" And that can't be true. And I asked Gary, and Gary thought, "No, I think it's probably true. You should go pick him up." So a couple days later, I show up at his apartment at 7 a.m., and it was early, it was 8 a.m. I got there, and I knocked on the door, and Billy Joe answered, and he led me into the apartment. And as we're walking through the apartment, there's his son Eddie playing guitar. There's his wife that he married 2 or 3 times there at the kitchen table. And he's walking me back, and he's going out. He's grabbing that old Martin in the back of the kitchen. And he's introducing me and walking me out. And he says, "Come on, boy, we got to get going. We got a drive ahead of us." And boom, jump in my car. He jumps in the seat next to me. And he says, "Go west. Go I-40 west." And I said, "Okay, sure." And I'm thinking to myself, I'm in a car alone with Billy Joe Shaver, who all I know about is knife a guy, beat a bunch of people up, have a gun, probably one of the best incredible songwriters this town's ever seen, but still scary as all get out. And I'm alone. And I'm thinking, okay, great. So I start driving. And as we're going west, he starts telling me stories. "Yeah, I went to the bar, and this guy looked at me funny, and man, I just gave him the fist, and we fought, we got from it. And then the other day, I was at the bar 2 months ago, and this guy pulled a knife on me, and I had a knife too, and it was like, oh my God." At that point, I was gripping the steering wheel, and I think I was going to choke it, and he told a story. He says, "This one guy took one wrong look at me, and I just cold cocked him." And I was like, I am not looking at Billy Joe. I'm going to keep it going to 65. Sorry, no, straight ahead, Billy. And we go to the Narrows of the Harpeth, which is west of town. And he grabs the guitar, and we get out of that car, and we start trudging up the mountain. And at that point, I'm carrying a 6x6 Hasselblad camera and a big tripod, okay? It's a lot of equipment. I'm much younger, of course. I can do this at that point. But it's still middle of summer. It's 95 degrees. And you can see what Billy Joe's wearing. It's hot. And we trudge up the mountain. And as we're walking up the mountain, he's telling me, "Yep, back in the day when I was really, really bad, I came up here and I was going to jump off this cliff. It was going to end my life. And I could not make myself better. And I got to the top of the cliff, and then there was a thunderstorm in the distance, and I saw heat lightning, and I hit my knees, and then the first words to Old Chunk of Coal came to me. And I wrote that song right there on the mountain. And I was like, my God, that is incredible. Old Chunk of Coal, another country classic song. You wrote it right here in your knees?" He said, "I did. I obviously didn't jump, and this cliff saved my life." And as we got to the top, he stopped, and he wouldn't go out there. I ran to the other side of the cliff. I set my gear up. I said, "I'll give him a couple minutes to compose himself." And he still wouldn't go out there. And I said, "Oh my God, I've just driven an hour and a half, heard all the stories in the world. I'm still scared to death of this man. And I'm not going to get a photo. He's not going to walk out in that cliff. What the heck am I going to do?" We stood there for 5 minutes in stone cold silence. And I said, "Billy Joe, could you play Old Chunk of Coal for me?" And that broke it. And he pulled that guitar up, and he walked out to that cliff, and he started singing Old Chunk of Coal. At that moment, I said, "My God, how lucky am I?" Snap, 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 snap. I got about 6 or 8 frames off. He abruptly stops, turns around, walks back down to the car, doesn't say a word to me. I wrap up my gear, run down to the car, I meet him there, he's sitting there waiting for me, and I'm going, okay, thank you, that was wonderful. I can't wait to hear the rest of the story. And he said, you've got the story. And he jumped in the car and we rode back to Nashville. He did not say a word to me. We pulled up. Now, that's a long trip of not saying a word. And I'm still gripping the steering wheel like I'm going to choke to death. We pulled up. He jumps out. I jump out. I'm thinking, is he going to come hit me? What's he going to do here? This man, I'm scared still. And he walks by the car and he gives me the biggest hug. Scares the dickens out of me. And he goes like this. He goes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've never been back there, and you got me back there, and it opened my doors, my creative doors. I thought they were closed, and that became, in his words, one of his favorite pictures of him all time, and for me too, obviously, because of what happened that morning. But it's strange enough. I mean, strange stories, but if you look at the history of Billy Joe, some of the songs he's written are true tales. So I just love this moment with him. It's such a revealing moment, kind of like Willie in a way, in a sense.
Could he actually play guitar? I know he had
Yeah, yeah, played really well. Absolutely amazing. You may know who John Prine is.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I have to ask.
The greatest.
John, I met John early '90s, and his manager Albinetta introduced us, and I was very lucky. I grew up in Kansas City, and my grandfather had a snooker table in the basement. My grandfather was a scratch golfer and a bowler and a snooker player, and he won trophies for all those things. And I didn't know what a snooker table was because I just thought that's just Grandpa's table. But a snooker table is different than a 8-ball table, right? It's longer, the balls are different, it's a different game. And little did I know that the postman from Chicago here was quite the snooker player. Matter of fact, he was a pool shark. And Albinetta knew that, and he pulled one on me. He says, go meet John down at the bar, Melrose, and go play some pool with him. You got money? I said, yeah, I got money. He said, shit, I'm not going to need it. I grew up playing snooker, man. I'll show Mr. Prine something or other, and this will be great. And met John down there and had a couple beers and put $20 on the table, and he smiled at me and said, let's go, son. And took my $20 in about 7 minutes. That smile right there is a smile you get when you're taking money away from a photographer. And I said, John, I had brought my camera, and I said, John, I don't need you to move right now. Just smile at me, buddy. And this was the smile of the winning pool player. He truly was an amazing songwriter, and we met several times at Melrose and played pool over the years. And just listening to him tell his stories was so amazing. But I really appreciate the fact that he opened me up a little bit in his private life, and because how many did you guys know he was a pool shark? I didn't know he was a pool shark either, and that was something he kind of kept to himself, and so I was glad to be the victim. But I got a good photo out of it. All right, let me see here. Here we go.
Did you get an illegal smile?
What's that?
Did you get an illegal smile?
Yeah, there you go. Right. Brooks and Dunn. You guys know Brooks and Dunn, obviously. I met Ronnie Kicks on their second album, and Don Cook produced it and wrote a bunch of it and with them. And one day, I think Ronnie looked at me and says, "Hey, you want to go out to the desert? We're going to film a video for a new song." And I said, "Yeah, sure, let's go out to the desert." And we jumped on a plane and went to Texas and jumped on a bus and went out to Del Rio, Texas. And then we went out in the middle of the Del Rio, Texas desert. And we went to this small little town, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And this town was built, I think, originally it was abandoned, and then it was reformed for movies. And so they were using it to film this video. And I was doing some documentary work for them at the time. And I walked out in front of this because the production was happening behind this little village. And I saw the sun setting, and then I saw the beginning of the gate to get in this little complex. And I just saw this photo, and I said, my God, I don't know what Ronnie and Kicks are doing right now, but I ran through that door, and they were in the middle production. The second that camera stopped, I grabbed both of them and said, excuse me, guys, I know you're shooting a video. I need you for literally 2 minutes. The sun's setting. And we ran out in front, And I said, just stand right there. Just stand right there near that big rock. You see, he kicks his left foot there. There's a big old rock. I said, don't, just get to that rock and stop. And I ran out, and the sun was on the horizon, literally. Look at those shadows. And again, one of those situations where I got 3 frames off, maybe 3 or 4 frames, and then they ran back into the production, and then we forgot about it. And then a couple of months later, I'm editing my film. This is, back in the old days, we had time to edit your stuff. You didn't have to have it the next day. And I came across, these 3 or 4 pictures that I shot just sort of as a happenstance, and realized that this is my favorite picture of Brooks and Dunn that I've ever shot. And it's just the sun, the look, the pants, the shadow. How many triangles are in this? Now I'm being geeky, okay? So, but there's so much storytelling in this image, and literally, we were there 3 minutes, and by the time we were done with those 3 minutes, that sun was gone. It was that quick, but still one of my favorite shots of those guys. Oh yes, so I used to hang around backstage of the Grand Opry a bunch, and this was early '90s, and tell me who these guys are. Come on, who are these folks?
Dwight Yoakam and Paul Rubens.
Dwight Yoakam and Pee Wee, right? Okay, so I'm walking down the hallway, and you can see to the left there's a dressing room, right? And I have my camera, and I'm just striding through, and I see Pee Wee looking in the mirror, adjusting his hat, and I go, "My God, is that Pee Wee Herman? This is at the Grand Opry?" And then he looks, he turns around, he sees me, he goes, and just makes a little, and he turns around, and he says, "Photo op." And I was like, "Cool, Pee Wee Herman photo op." At that same moment, Dwight Yoakam saunters up from the other side, and they meet in the hallway. This was not planned. And they look at each other. This is the moment.
Pee Wee Herman's sister lived.
That's right. She was a lawyer here in town.
ACLU.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I got to meet her years later. He was here to do something for the show. I think, I'm not sure, I can't quite remember what his, what it was, but those two met in the hallway, and they looked each other over, and this was just another 15-second event that I happened to get a couple stamps off and captured, I think, a beautiful moment. I love the humor in this, I can see Dwight, I don't know what Dwight's thinking, I know what Pee Wee's thinking. This little photo moment he thought maybe he'd be alone with, now got 100 times better with Dwight. Because at that point, Dwight had a couple hits, and he was up and coming, and really, becoming a star. But to me, it's just that little funny moment that really captures both those people.
This is probably at the Minnie Pearl special in 1980.
You know what? It might have been something to do with Minnie, because Minnie and Pee Wee were friends.
It was a special on
Yeah.
the Country Music Channel.
Yep. It could have. It was '93, maybe. So that probably is what happened. Yeah, somewhere in there. Oh, Jack and Chris Christopherson, and this one is also one of my favorites. Obviously, I think Jack always considered Chris a son in a lot of ways, and there's so much history, obviously, with Cowboy. But we were at a movie opening, and somewhere in Green Hills, and we were inside a tent somewhere, and I was talking with Cowboy, and I saw Chris sneak in through the tent, and he spotted Cowboy, and Jack spotted Cowboy, and they locked eyes, and then Chris came right over, and this was the hug that transpired at that moment. I just happened to be witnessing this, and to me, there's so much love and respect in these two icons. And again, one of those situations where you photograph something, but you're there for something else. I was there to cover a movie opening, didn't really think too much about it. Snap, 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 great. Let's keep moving. Let's shoot some more photos. But I look back at it now, and I found this, literally it was maybe a couple years later, I was editing, going through some old film, and this one popped up, and it was like, my gosh, there's so much into this photo that I had to pull it out and make it part of the project. But, such amazing careers, and we lost Chris recently, but I sure miss him a bunch. Let me see here. Maybe we should stop. Do you guys want to ask some questions? I know. Are we a cold stop at 2, or you tell me?
We can go a little bit more. Certainly can tell us about her.
Who's this, folks? Loretta. I'm
Coal miner's daughter.
there you go. How lucky am I to be able to hang around Loretta a little bit? And she was the feistiest, the most brilliant. I love her songwriting, her personality. There's nobody like her. She's whatever was on her heart, she said it. And this photo came together quite simply. She was coming out of a building on Music Row after a short performance. This might have been CMA week, maybe. And she had said hello to me, and she was walking towards me. And then she kind of hit a spotlight. There was a light on top of the door where she's walking out of, and it kind of spotlight lit her pretty quickly. And I quickly threw my camera up and just snapped this frame of her kind of coming towards me to chat. And again, it's one of those photos. I swear I don't plan this stuff that I shot and then forgot about. You know, because we had a nice conversation, and I shot some more photos of her. I shot her later that night. But then this one kind of got tucked away, and it took years for me to realize just what a beautiful image this was. She looks like an angel, you know, and literally, I mean, this was 2010 maybe. This was middle 2000s. I shot this, and I didn't find this till months before this book was published. I was digging through my files, going, what am I missing here? Because I have boxes and boxes and boxes of negatives that have not been gone through, and they're impossible to go through. And I try to go through a few every time I get a minute's break. But I'm an instructor at Murray State University. I also, still full-time photographer here in Nashville. So I'm being pulled 12 different ways. So I don't get a chance to go through my files a lot. But this one was pure luck that I came across this negative and came across this moment and flipped my, because I was very lucky towards the end of her life to get together with her at her house, and I pulled off this beautiful portrait of her sitting on her sofa playing guitar. And to me, it was like a great way for Loretta to be represented in my project. And then this one, literally a month before we went to press, this one came up, and I threw the other one out the door. It was like, this speaks so much to me about who she was and how beautiful, and like I said, like just an angel walking through the door. Let me see here. Chris at the Ryman. One day I was at the Ryman. I think it was 2010, and he was doing some. He was getting ready to do a performance. I think it was a flood benefit they were going to do, and the sound guy was up at the top of the Ryman. The light was pouring in, and I was sitting in the back of the stage, and there was maybe security on the right, and it was just us in there all alone. And he turned around and he started playing Sunday Morning Coming Down to me. And I don't know why he picked, maybe because I was the only guy sitting back there. But he sat there and just played the whole song, and didn't even turn around once. And I was shocked. I was thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I managed to get off a few frames. But to me, one of my favorite shots of him. That's the old Ryman floor too. That was before they redid it. You can tell at that point in 2010 how many years that floor had been there. And
other shots have a foot up like that.
yeah, isn't that cool? The cowboy boot up like that. Yeah, I know. And just to hear Sunday Morning Coming Down, is amazing. Let me see here. I don't know. Now I get into my rocks. That's Chris Cornell rocker there. Michael, one of the best bass players in the world. How do I end this? Dierks Bentley. So Dierks is, I think, going to show up at a #1 party, which makes Nashville unusual. Nashville is the only city that has #1 parties. Did you know that? Nobody has #1 parties. We have #1 parties. I'm waiting for Dierks to show up to celebrate a #1 of his. I'm sitting in the parking lot on 8th Avenue, and Dierks is late. I'm kind of late, and I'm thinking, wow, this may not go off on time. And then there's a roar down 8th Avenue, and then this muddy truck screams into the parking lot. And I go, my God, what happened? Was this guy in a wreck? And then from the tinted windows pops Dierks. And he smiles at me. I said, Dierks, do not move. And he stands, he moved 2 feet to the left so I could see the muddy tire. And he gave me the hurry up son, I'm late look. But as you can tell, look at the back left of the truck. I think that was the name of the album, 5150 at the point. And he had painted it in with his hands. But this is part of what I love about hanging around Nashville. You know, you could just, you never know who you're going to run into and where. I can't tell you how many times I've run into Chet or Prine having lunch, or you know, walking into the number one parties and seeing the recipient show up in the muddiest truck you've ever seen in your life. That's what makes Nashville so amazing and charming and so down to earth, and I guess why we are the Music City, don't you think? Okay, so we're at 2 o'clock here. You guys know Guy Clark?
Yeah.
There's another Texas troubadour right there. This was taken in his house one morning. I got the invite from his wife, and we went over there and had coffee and cigarettes, literally, and spent some time with him talking about songwriting. An amazing troubadour. He said, "Son, I love for you. I love for you to see my songbook." And you know, Guy was a man of few words, right? And Susanna's wife did most of the talking, but when Guy said something, you stopped and listened to every single word. He brought his songbook out and he laid it down on the table, and he had it open. I think this is the Randall knife. He had written the Randall knife, and he laid the guitar down, and then he disappeared, and he brought back the Randall knife. And if you guys know the Randall knife song, go look it up. But it's about his father. That's his father's knife. And so he laid that knife down on the page. I did not do a thing, folks. All I did was watch Guy lay that stuff down on the table, and I realized, my God, he just made the most beautiful portrait for me. All I have to do is focus the camera and let the light hit it perfectly. And if you see this print, I know in the screen you can't see it very well, but when you see a real print of this, you get to see everything Guy erased. You see him working on this song, changing words, crossing out phrases. And that's, to me, a fascinating little insight into who Guy was. You see the writing process. And so I treasure this just because it was Guy's idea. I treasure it because Guy went in the back room and dug up the knife, got his guitar, laid it out. I mean, how could I ask for better? You know, and made this beautiful, beautiful portrait. I have so many great portraits of Guy, luckily, but this is honestly one of my favorites. It's such an insight into the way he wrote his songs. Maybe we should, what went it there? There's modern Nashville, okay? Quite different than the little town I showed you early on when I moved in. This was probably 2022 maybe, or 23? Yeah, quite different. Yeah, a little different. Progress. Here's the funny story about Chet. So when I used to go up to Chet's office, we'd sit there and we'd talk about anything. He'd say, "What are you working on, son? You know, did you go shoot the football game? Did you do this? What's that? What's the news of the day?" And the one thing Chet would complain about constantly, and it was funny to me at the point, was like, Nashville. This was 1991. Nashville. Man, this town's growing too fast. I don't like this town. I don't like where it's at right now. It's too darn big. It's way too big. Matter of fact, it should stop growing right now. And he would go on and on and on about how big and fast and how crazy Nashville was. And I said, yeah, okay, Chet, but I kind of like it, you know. To me, at that point, as a 27-year-old kid, it was like, great, Nashville's got it. You know, to me, it was a small town. I grew up in Kansas City and St. Louis and a little bit of Chicago. So to me, I thought Nashville was a tiny little town, but to Chet, it was monstrosity at that point. So I think about that a lot. And how when I driving down I-440 and I say, Nashville's too big, and I can't stand this town now, and I can't find a parking spot, and the restaurants are too expensive, and all that great stuff I complain about now. I think about Chet complaining in 1991 and how the wheel goes around. But maybe we should stop it here. Oh, do you guys, here's the book. I'm real proud of this because I self-published. I did talk to a lot of publishers trying to get this done, and they all wanted to change the cover, change the title, or own the content, and they wanted me to pay for the advertising, and they wanted me to do all these things, and I was like, well, listen, since you're doing that, why do I need a publisher? Why don't I just invest, put together my own investment and make that sacrifice? And if it fails, I will be so happy to sleep on my pillow that night. I won't have any problems because it's mine. I did it my way. And because if you trust a publisher, you're on the hot plate for about a month. And then after that, you're history. And to me, I've been working on this project for 34 years. And I'm into, this is maybe year and a half, I've been pushing this book, and you know, I'm glad to say that we're pretty much sold out. So we're going to go into second printing, and so you know, thank you. Sometimes you got to trust your gut and go for it, and I was ready to go for it at that point. So yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This
you.
has been a wonderful, intimate look at these people whose names we know. You've got a question.
Oh yes, questions.
Well,
Yes, sir.
first of all, I came in late and I'm sorry for that, traffic in Nashville.
Shocker.
Tell us a little bit about your equipment and your process, and then your thoughts on the transition from film and what you call negatives
Yes.
and digital photography.
Absolutely. So, real quick, and so I started, like I said, in high school, and I got thrown in a professional darkroom right away, my junior year in high school. And so this was 1980, 81, and I was around, at that time, old photographers who were bitterly complaining that 2 1/4 film, the big film, was being replaced by 35 millimeter film. And these old guys were like, I hate 35 millimeter film. It's not big enough. And they would have bitter arguments over what would win. And I love both, you know. And I said, well, why can't you use both? No, the argument was you can't. You got to pick one. And then in 2000, when the world turned digital, and of course me being the early adopter, I was like, God, I love digital. I love digital. I got to try this. And I bought my first digital camera. It cost me $4,000, and it was 3 megapixels. And so there was a transition period from 99 to 2002 where I shot film and I shot digital, where I did both, and then I got really good at both, and then of course digital took over. So to answer your question, film from 80, 81 to 2002, Nikon 35 millimeter cameras, Hasselblad 501C 6x6, Mamiya 6x7. They had a little rangefinder, which was an amazing camera. And so I used whatever the project called for. I didn't mind jumping around. And then when the digital world hit, I put my money where my brain was, and I said $3,000, 4,000 bucks, 3 megapixels, let's go. And then the next camera came out with 6 megapixels, another 4,000 bucks, let's go. And then 2006, 12 megapixels came along, and that was like $5,000. And it was like, oh my God, where are we going? And I bought that. And so I love technology. And so I'm a geek, and I went with the times. And so every image if you look at my book or look at my website, you'll see black and white, you'll see color. Every image is fashioned over an analog look. I grew up with Kodachrome, Kodacolor, Fuji, Tri-X, Plus X. You better believe it, Tri-X was 400 ISO. It was the film every photojournalist used all over the world. I can tell you 100 ways to develop Tri-X and expose it. And every one of my black and white pictures, I formulate to look digitally after every film format. So to me, I look back at my history and I try to match it with the digital technology. Because right now in my life, I just don't have any time to be sitting in dark rooms. You know, or energy or patience as I did. Because, you know, back in the day, I spent my whole life in the dark room. And actually, there was a trick to that. In my own dark room, I could put up my speakers, my turntable, and have a whole record collection. So it was my excuse to say, I'm going to leave you world and disappear and develop film, and then I would crank up my favorite music, and the whole place would shake. But it was me escaping. So again, music playing a part in my life. You know, I think I need to go develop film. You know, and duck into the dark room. But does that answer your question a little bit?
Absolutely, thank you.
And you know what I shoot with today a lot? And this is a 17, and these things are amazing. And I teach at Murray State University, and I'm in charge of the photo program, and I also teach, JMC, so journalism, mass comm, and some other things, advertising. And in my beginning photojournalism class, we don't pick up a 35 millimeter camera. We use our phones. And I teach them to shoot vertically and horizontally, and also still photos. And because that's the world they live in, and that's the world you need to get into and used to. So we use this a lot before we transition into bigger cameras. But honestly, we're at that point now where give this another few generations and maybe the 35 millimeter cameras might not be needed. It's moving so fast. Yes, sir.
I was talking to the security director at Nashville State one time, security
Yeah.
guard, and he had a bachelor's degree, Bachelor of say, and got laid off. I'm just wondering if photography really a viable profession, or
Yeah.
is it, can you still get a job in photography?
So, can you still get a job in photography? Absolutely. It's changing, like it's always has over the years. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the years I would work for magazines and love working for magazines, or newspapers who had Sunday magazines. You guys remember Sunday magazines? You pick up a Sunday, there'd be a Sunday magazine with incredible, deep, beautiful stories told with photos, and those all,
Or reprinting.
those all went away. But there are different ways to tell stories now. And so I always teach my kids is you have to be on the boat that goes forward to whatever vehicle. Well, hold on. Here's a better way to say it. You have to be in the room, right? If you're not in the room, nobody's going to hear you. So where's the room these days? Well, the room is right here. Okay. So if you're not in the room and you're trying to do photography or any type of journalism or any kind of communications, if you're not in the room, nobody's going to hear you. You can be on the outside of the house screaming all you want. Nobody's out there. And so I teach my kids, be in the room, be present, know what's going on, you know? Look, know history, know what's behind you, but also know what's coming to you. You know, don't stand aside like the guys in 1980 used to tell me, 2 1/4 is the king and 35mm sucks. Or in 2000, I had a bunch of friends, I'm never coming to digital, I'm quitting photography. I said, my God, why would you quit such a beautiful profession, storytelling profession? Why would you quit? You know, so what? You learn something new. It becomes, you know, you've got to use this noggin. You've got to use it, you know. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. And this is what I preach to my kids, is always push forward, you know, and move with the times. Because if you want to be a storyteller, today is the easiest, which is to sometimes a detriment, because everybody has a megaphone, but it's the right time to be a storyteller.
One other question, do you take commissions?
I'm a commercial photographer, you know, so I still work for Bridgestone, I still work for Jack, I did mention that I've been photographing Jack Daniels for like 25 years. Those black and white ads you see with the portraits and master distillers, I do those and other things. So I do a lot of corporate work, I do a ton of music work still. It's different, of course, different music work. We don't have albums anymore or CDs, you know, we're online. So I do a lot of commercial work in a sense. Commissions are, I guess, are more art-centric maybe. But yeah, I love taking assignments. And I love taking assignments whether it's a billion-dollar company or whether it's, I just did a portrait session with a young female songwriter who just moved to town. And she's all of 14 years old and has so much talent. It reminded me so much of Taylor Swift. It was crazy. And I did something for her. It doesn't bother me. I don't care. It's the fact that every morning I wake up, every morning I get out of bed, and I cannot wait to put that camera around my neck and do something I love. And I'm never going to retire. I don't know what I do because I'm doing something I truly love. And so, you know, that to me is keeping me, it drives me.
You got on 2 watches?
Yeah, Alpha, Omega. So, analog world and digital world. You see, I can't.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you so very much, Ed.